Would you believe that one of the world's most mysterious technologies is hidden not in a modern laboratory, but in the walls of a tomb that is more than 4,000 years old? What if I told you that some granite stones in ancient Egypt have been cut with such marks that even modern engineers cannot say for sure how they were made? And what if those marks indicate a force whose name we no longer know? Would you start questioning everything written in history books? Stay until the very end of the video, because the mystery will deepen as we go along. And be sure to tell us in the comments which country you are watching the video from. If you like such unsolved mysteries of history, then subscribe to the channel now. There is a place hidden under the desert of Saqqara, Egypt, that has amazed researchers, engineers, and historians for centuries. This place is called the Serapeum. From the outside, it may seem like an ordinary archaeological site, but once you enter, the scene changes completely. Enormous granite boxes line the sides of a vast underground corridor carved into solid rock. Each box weighs between 70 and 100 tons. Not only that, but each box and its lid are made from a single block of stone. Even in modern times, cutting, transporting, and precisely positioning such massive granite blocks is a major engineering challenge. This is where the first question arises. How did the ancient Egyptians accomplish this task? The mainstream explanation is that these stones were slowly carved using copper chisels, stone hammers, and abrasive sand. This explanation has been written in textbooks for decades, but when modern engineers began to examine the surface of the stones, they found features that defied simple explanations. In some places, the cuts are so even and controlled that they appear to have been made by modern machines. Even more astonishing, some of the surfaces are at a level of flatness that would be extremely difficult to achieve with ordinary hand-operated tools. This is why the Serapeum has been the center of controversy for many years. Some researchers believe that we may be underestimating the skill of ancient craftsmen. Others believe that there may be a hint of a technological process here that we do not yet fully understand. Of course, this does not mean that the ancient Egyptians had modern machines, but it is also true that the answers to some questions are still unclear. The mystery deepens when researchers look at the ancient quarries of Aswan. Many granite blocks were collected from here. Strange drill marks, deep grooves, and circular cuts are found in various places in the quarry. Analyzing these marks, some engineers claim that their rate of progress was much higher than that of ordinary hand-operated machines. Although these claims are controversial, they still raise an important question. Do we really know how skilled the craftsmen of ancient Egypt were? Then another strange thing comes to light. In 1938, Egyptologist Salim Hassan created an inscription document that later became a source of curiosity for many researchers. The language of the inscription was administrative in nature, that is, not a religious incantation, but rather a document of practical use. There are some words that are still debated about their exact meaning, one word in particular, which is considered very rare in the entire written history of Egypt. What did this word mean? Is it a description of a machine, a process, or something else entirely? As more information comes to light, it becomes clear that instead of answering the mystery, new questions are being raised. For the boxes of the Serapeum are not only large, but their insides are also extraordinarily smooth. In some places, a precision has been shown that has been compared to the standards of modern industrial production. However, it is important to be careful here, because many popular claims can be exaggerated. The fact is that some of the features are truly amazing, but there is still no consensus among scientists and researchers about their interpretation. And here begins the most important chapter of our search. If these stones really indicate a skill or technology that we do not fully understand, where did that knowledge come from? Why is it that work of the same quality is so rare in later periods? And why do some of the most perfect granite structures in history still stand before us, raising mountains of questions? We'll have to dig deeper to find the answers to these questions, because in the next chapter, we'll look at the stone's cutting marks, drill grooves, and engineering analysis that further complicate the mystery. But this is where things get even more confusing. Because the deeper we look at the granite boxes of the Serapeum, the more it seems that we are not just standing in front of an archaeological site. Rather, we are standing in front of a question whose answer may lie somewhere beyond the conventional interpretation of history. For many years, researchers have examined the inner surfaces of these huge boxes. Some have tried to measure their flatness, some have analyzed the cut marks, and others have tried to understand how such heavy stones were brought from hundreds of kilometers and placed in this underground corridor. But the more information is accumulated, the more the mystery seems to have deepened. Granite is no ordinary stone. It is one of the hardest natural rocks on Earth. In modern times, specialized machines, powerful motors, and extremely hard abrasives are used in factories to cut such stones. However, in the case of ancient Egypt, the conventional explanation is that this work was done with the help of copper tools, stone hammers, and sand. Theoretically, this is not impossible. With enough time, labor, and skill, much is possible. But the problem arises when analyzing certain cutting marks and drill marks. In some cases, the marks appear to have progressed in a way that is difficult for ordinary hand-operated tools to interpret. This is why the Aswan quarries are so important. It is here that the unfinished obelisk, which still lies attached to the original bedrock, is found. If it had been completed, it would have been one of the largest obelisks in history. It would have weighed close to 1,000 tons. But at some point, the work suddenly stopped. The usual explanation is that the construction was stopped because the stone had cracked. But when some engineers looked closely at the cutting sections, they noticed that in many places the quality of the cutting was the same from start to finish. It was as if the work had not gradually weakened, but had stopped altogether at some point. Here comes another controversial question. If the ancient builders did indeed use a special method that was lost in later times, where did that knowledge go? Why do many granite structures from later dynasties seem to be relatively less perfect? Why do some ancient structures have such subtleties that have not been repeated in later times? Technology generally improves slowly throughout history, but some researchers believe that the opposite may be true for certain Egyptian structures. Of course, this is a controversial idea, and not all mainstream researchers agree with it, but the question remains. The mystery deepens when it comes to inscriptions, because we know that the ancient Egyptians loved to keep records. They kept lists of workers, kept accounts of food distribution, wrote down construction details, and even recorded the transportation of stones by sea. But surprisingly, some of the most perfect granite works in history have very limited clear technical details. It seems that we can see the results, but much of the process remains in the dark. And this is where the discussion of the mysterious document from the tomb, known as KV-17, begins. Some researchers claim that it uses some administrative language that does not resemble ordinary religious descriptions. Rather, it sounds like a document of a functional process or mechanism. Although this explanation is not universally accepted, it has intrigued many people, especially when it comes to an unusual word whose meaning is still debated. Was it the name of a power source, a mechanical process, or something else entirely? We don't know for sure. One thing is certain, however. Some of the features found at the Serapeum, Aswan, and several other sites in Egypt are still the subject of research today, and the more modern technology is used to examine these sites, the more new questions are being raised, because sometimes history does not give us answers. Rather, it opens the door to even greater mysteries. And before we can delve into the next level of this mystery, we need to look at the physical evidence that has become one of the greatest debates among modern engineers and historians. But the mystery does not stop there, because as researchers continue to analyze the granite cut marks, drill marks, and remains of ancient mines, they are faced with a problem that has not been fully solved to this day. It is not just how the stones were cut. Rather, the question is, how advanced was the knowledge behind this work? And where did that knowledge come from? Because like many mysteries of history, here too we see the result, but we do not see the entire path to produce that result. Some drill cores found in the mines of Aswan have been the focus of interest of engineers for many years. These are samples of rock that preserve the traces of ancient drilling. When the spiral grooves of these traces are analyzed, some researchers claim that the cutting progress was surprisingly fast. Of course, there is controversy about this interpretation. Many experts believe that this idea is due to differences in measurement methods or interpretations. But the problem does not end here, because the same question returns again and again in different studies. How was it possible to carry out such controlled work in such hard granite? An important part of this debate is connected with a mineral called corundum. In modern times, corundum is used as an abrasive in the industrial field. Its hardness is extremely high. It has been claimed that the presence of corundum has been found in some excavation sites, which indicates that ancient craftsmen may have used an abrasive material that is much more effective than ordinary sand. If this is true, then it proves that their technological knowledge was more advanced than we think. However, it is important to be careful here too, because there is no consensus among researchers on every discovery. But the strangest thing is that no matter how much technical analysis we do, some questions still remain unanswered. For example, the inner corners of some granite boxes in the Serapeum are so perfect that the methods used to make them are still being debated today. The flatness of some surfaces is extremely high by modern standards. Of course, this does not mean that modern machines were used there, but it is also true that achieving such results required extraordinary skill and long experience. And here another uncomfortable question from history comes to the fore. If the ancient Egyptians had such knowledge, where is the continuity of that knowledge? Why is the same level of perfection not always seen in later constructions? Why do some technologies seem to suddenly disappear from the stage of history? We usually see technology in a straight line, a gradual improvement from the past to the present. But the reality can sometimes be more complicated. Some knowledge is lost, some techniques disappear, and sometimes we see only traces of it, but the method is no longer there. This is why there is so much discussion about the KV-17 inscription, because it is not just a question of a word or a phrase. Rather, it is a question of the possibility that some important information may have been lost to the flow of time. Over the centuries, tombs have been looted, libraries destroyed, documents lost. What history has reached us may be only a small part of the whole picture. And if there really was any special technical knowledge, most of it may no longer exist today. Imagine a craftsman standing in front of a huge granite block 4,000 years ago. He has some methods that he learned from his teacher. That teacher, in turn, from his previous generation. That knowledge has been passed down for centuries. But then at some point that continuity is broken. For whatever reason, war, political change, economic collapse, or social transformation. Then the next generation is amazed by those works, but cannot fully restore the same methods. Such events have happened more than once in history, and this is where the mystery of the Serapeum deepens. Because we are not just looking at stone boxes, we are looking at a civilization that achieved something extraordinary in its time. Perhaps we have understood many of their methods, but perhaps some parts still remain in the dark, and that darkness is what keeps curiosity alive. But the biggest question has not yet been asked, because if all this is just the result of the extraordinary skill of ancient craftsmen, then it is itself one of the most amazing achievements in human history. And if there is a lost technological knowledge behind it, some parts of which we do not yet understand, then our idea of history is bound to expand even further. And that is why the story of the Serapeum is not just an archaeological mystery, it is a story of human knowledge, memory, and lost skills. And as researchers continue to search for answers to these questions, they realize that perhaps the real center of the mystery is not inside the stone, but in that silent void where the answers should be, but are not. And it is that void that leads us to the final and most thought-provoking chapter of this story. The path we have traveled so far is not just the story of an ancient structure, nor just the story of a few granite boxes or a lost inscription. It is the story of a question that has forced history, archaeology, engineering, and physics to sit down at the same table in search of answers. Because those huge granite boxes of the Serapeum of Saqqara are still there today. Even after thousands of years, the precision of their surfaces has not changed. Their inner angles still meet in a way that even modern engineers are amazed when measured. The question is, if they were really made with just copper chisels, stone hammers, and abrasive sand, why couldn't any other ancient civilization on Earth recreate the same level of precision? In seeking answers to this question, researchers are faced with a strange reality. We often think of history as a straight line. People gradually improved, technology developed in stages, and each new era gained more knowledge than the previous one. But the Serapeum, the Aswan drill core, the unfinished obelisk, and some ancient granite structures tell a different story. They suggest that in some cases, past construction techniques reached a level that we still can't fully explain. But here's an important point to remember. The existence of a mystery doesn't mean that supernatural explanations are true. The absence of an answer doesn't prove the existence of aliens, lost supercivilizations, or supernatural powers. Real research always relies on evidence. And that's why modern scientists are still carefully gathering data. They're analyzing the smallest grains of rock. They're examining cut marks under a microscope. They're using new scanning technologies, because history's greatest discoveries often come not from exciting speculation, but from patient measurements. Still, uncomfortable questions remain. If the ancient Egyptians really did use corundum-based abrasives, how did they collect them on such a large scale? If they used a special mechanical system, where is the clear archaeological evidence for that system? And if that technology existed, why did it disappear in later ages? Effective technology usually doesn't disappear. People improve it. They preserve it for generations. But here we see signs that seem to have suddenly fallen silent at some point in history. That is why the mystery of the Serapeum is not just a technological puzzle. It is also a puzzle of memory. For how could a civilization do something whose detailed knowledge has not reached later generations? Could knowledge have been deliberately lost? Was a particular technical skill confined to a limited group? Or are we still seeing a very small part of the whole picture? Modern technology is beginning to provide some answers to these questions. High-resolution laser scans, 3D modeling, material analysis, and digital reconstructions are giving researchers new possibilities. Measurements that were impossible a few decades ago are now possible to determine to a thousandth of a millimeter. Researchers hope that future scans may provide a clearer picture of the cutting process. Perhaps they will reveal new evidence that we have exaggerated the subject, or perhaps they will reveal something that will challenge current ideas. Imagine right now, a scientist in a laboratory somewhere in the world might be examining a tiny sample of stone from the Serapeum. Maybe a new microscope is detecting a feature that has never been seen before. Maybe a computer simulation is showing that ancient engineers were far more skilled than we thought. And maybe in the next 10 years, a study will be published that will change the course of this entire debate. That's the beauty of history. It's never a completely closed book. We often think the past is over, but in reality, the past is constantly being rediscovered. Every new excavation, every new scan, every new analysis teaches us to question old ideas. And it's the ability to question that drives science forward. Look back at those silent tunnels at Saqqara. The 100-ton granite boxes stand still in the darkness. They don't speak. They don't explain. But they leave a question that remains as valid today as it was centuries ago. Do we really know what ancient humans were capable of? Maybe the answer is simpler than we think, or maybe it's more complicated. But until that answer is fully known, this mystery will live on. Researchers will return. New generations of scientists will measure again. They will test again with new technology. And each time, the stones will remain silent in the same way. But sometimes silence is the strongest testimony. Because some mysteries of history exist not to give us answers, but to teach us to ask questions. Now I want to know, which one do you find the most mysterious? The huge granite box of the Serapeum? The unfinished obelisk of Aswan? That strange inscription? Or the possibility that we still haven't understood the whole picture of ancient technology? Also, write in the comments which country or city in the world you are watching this video from. I always love to see history-loving viewers joining this search from some part of the world. And if you like unsolved mysteries of history, lost technologies, amazing discoveries of ancient civilizations, and real events that challenge science, then subscribe to the channel. Because in the future we will explore many more stories where the legend ends, but the questions do not end. Because the older the world, the deeper its secrets, and our search has only just begun.